Hi, it's Charlie Minato from halfwheel.com, and I'm here for a humidifier review, albeit not a review of this particular humidifier, but this is a good starting point. This is an example of an electronic humidifier, specifically of an evaporative humidifier, and that nuance is going to become important in a minute or so. So this is from a company called Aristocrat, and I have actually used this humidifier in a cabinet humidor for many years. This humidifier, I would say, is marketed more at a smaller cabinet humidor, but there are some that are made for desktop humidors, but for the most part, we're talking about cabinet humidors and larger, and again, this is kind of on the smaller side of an electronic humidifier. So they have 4 pieces. I'd argue this is the most important one. This is the controller, the brains of the operation. You can see there's a screen, there's some buttons to set the humidity. This one's also got a visible sensor right here. Some of them, the sensors are a little bit more integrated. The next 2 important pieces are both part of the humidifier itself. So it starts with the black reservoir. This is just where the water goes. So just a big bin full of water. And then up top, there's a computer fan that is also important. And finally, all this is going to need some power. Most of these units plug into the wall. Again, those smaller desktop humidor models, they might be battery operated, but if we're talking about cabinet humidifiers or humidifiers for walk-in environments, they're going into the wall itself. So the way this humidifier works is, first things first, I'm going to run the wires. There's a wire that runs into the controller from the outlet, and there's another wire that runs from the controller to the humidifier. I'm going to place the humidifier at the bottom of the cabinet humidor. I'm going to take off that little red cap, fill this up with water, ideally distilled water. If you got RO or DI water, that's even better, but let's try to stay away from the tap water. Put the cap back on. I'm going to set the controller to the level of humidity I want, let's say 70%. And what's going to happen is this sensor is going to constantly measure the humidity, the relative humidity inside of the humidor. And when it gets to be below a certain level, let's say it gets to be 68.5%, this thing is going to tell the humidifier we need more humidity. So the fan is going to kick on, it shoots upwards, and the fan is going to take that moist air that sits above the water level in the reservoir and spread it throughout the humidor. And then when it gets to be above a certain level, let's say 70.5% relative humidity, the controller is going to tell the humidifier, we're good. This thing will just shut off. Nothing will happen. There won't be any more action from the fan. And when it drops below, the fan will kick back on, and so on and so forth. And this process will just repeat itself over and over again, basically until it runs out of water, and then it will start beeping at me. So this is what I'm actually reviewing. This is the Sonic Humidifiers Cabinet Humidifier. It is an electronic humidifier, but it is not an evaporative humidifier. Instead is an ultrasonic humidifier. And I'm not an engineer, but I guess I got to tell you how that works and what that means. So ultrasonic humidification is not new, and it's not even new for cigars. The way it works is that inside of this thing, there is a transducer that vibrates back and forth at extremely high frequencies, higher than the human ear can hear, hence the ultrasonic part of the equation. Those sound waves are not designed to work like a speaker. Again, we can't hear them. Some animals probably can, but they're designed to break down the water. So the sound waves hit the water, and it turns the water into smaller pieces of water. And that presents a number of advantages. For cigar smokers and for cigar humidors, the big advantage is those smaller particles can more evenly distribute, in theory, throughout your humidor, and you get better humidification where you're not getting certain parts of your humidor that are too wet or too dry, etc. If you're a data center or a large like office building that needs a humidification solutions, the big advantage with ultrasonic, from what I understand, is that it uses a lot less power, a lot less electricity than the traditional evaporative humidors. And again, this has been around for decades, but to my knowledge, this is the first time that it was made an ultrasonic humidifier for a cabinet-style cigar humidor. Instead, the ultrasonic humidifiers that have been marketed for the cigar industry have all been, to my knowledge, for walk-in humidors. But in 2023, Sonic introduced this model. I believe I was one of the first people to buy it, and I've been using it ever since. And so now I'm going to show you how it works. So a tour around the humidifier. First things first, this has got the controller built into the humidifier itself. There are some buttons over here to turn it on and adjust the humidity levels. And then you'll see in a minute, this turns into a big screen over here. On the lid, this is where the unit gets refilled, and pretty self-explanatory there. And this is actually where the mist comes out, which you'll hopefully see in a minute. On the sides of the unit, these are for hooking it up to a water line. So this unit can be fully plumbed in, both water in and water out. It comes with some other attachments here to help you do that fitting. I did not do that. We don't have a water line anywhere near our cabinet humidors, but it is an option that you can have, and it's a pretty unique one at that. At the bottom of the humidifier, there is actually a humidity sensor down here, and it's one of 2 humidity sensors that this particular unit has. The other one is not on the humidifier itself. It is external. So it is this thing, and it's on a wire. There's a little microchip inside of this, and it's actually USB-C of all things, and just plug them right here. Ideally, you're going to want to take this and place it pretty high up in the cabinet humidor, so that way you've got a sensor at the bottom of the humidor where this thing is, and then you have this thing up top. Now, it only gets more complicated from there. So, taking off the lid, you just remove that cap, and then you got the bottom of the humidifier. Now, normally in an evaporative humidifier, this is just a big like plastic bin. Totally not the case here. There's a lot going on, more than even I can see. And that is because there's a false floor in this unit. And so the way that the water goes, it either gets, plumbed in or you're refilling it. And then there's this little circle right here. And I believe that is where the ultrasonic transducer is, just below the floor of the container. But I did a poor job of explaining these two exhaust-looking things on the back. So the smaller one, the one on the right, has a fan back there, and I believe that's where the mist initially goes, sort of as an intake. And then there's the one on the left, which has an even larger fan, and that is sort of the blower to push the humidity out. And so when the humidifier wants to add humidity, both are running. But the one on the left also runs by itself, and that happens when those two humidity sensors aren't in equilibrium, but the humidifier doesn't want to add any more humidity. So the one on the left will run, and it just operates like a fan trying to create airflow to help equalize the humidity within your humidor. And there are some other things at the bottom of the humidifier. This right here is a UV light, which is designed to help slow the growth of both mold and bacteria. Sonic recommends cleaning this thing out every 6 months. I waited a little longer than a year. It was gross, but not as gross as it probably should have been, given I waited about a year. And then the other two things over here are designed for water level. So one measures if the water level gets too high, and the other one if it gets too low. All right, so this thing comes with an instruction manual that's got a setup guide in it. Easy to follow, and I would recommend doing that. But let's say you've decided not to, and instead you want to set this thing up. First and foremost, figure out where this thing is going to go. It's not just a matter of where it physically fits, but there are some things you want to avoid. For example, you do not want to have this in a humidor where there are cigar boxes below it, or really cigars below it. That is because the humidity goes this way out the top of the unit, and the cigars are down here, and they will not be humidified as well as you would like. I'd also recommend avoiding having loose cigars, like within a foot or so of the front of this thing. Cigars in boxes, if they're up here, are fine, but this is where the humidity comes out of. It is going to be quite humid, to say the least, directly above this unit. So you got to figure out that. You got to figure out power. If you're going to plumb the unit in, those things got to be considered. Let's say you've got that all determined. The first thing I would do is actually run this cable for the external humidity sensor. Right, and so that's probably going to involve you moving some shelves around. At least that's what happened in my case. So figure out where this goes. It does come with like a little clamp if you need help to try to secure it in place. But figure out where that's going to go. You don't necessarily need to plug it in immediately. And then the next thing I would do before any water or power is involved is grab that bag of fittings that you thought you didn't need. And there are these two black plastic stoppers. They are designed to go on the side of the unit here if you're not going to plumb it in, and they will stop the water from coming out of the side here if you overfill the unit. And I have done that before, and that creates a puddle inside the bottom of your humidor, which then needs to be cleaned up. So those two stoppers would be a very helpful thing to do. Let's say you got that out of the way. I think ideally, like, you fill this up with water and then plug it in, but if we're being reasonable here, like, it's probably easier to plug it in than it is to do it the other way. So I'm going to grab my power source, and I got the power adapter, and let's see, back of the unit, nothing too fancy going on over here, and I can't see it, but I guess that's like somewhat reasonable. Now the unit has got power, and you can see a little red power button. Maybe you can't. All right, so gonna unhook it. Next, one of the more important things here, in terms of the amount of water that you put in here, you should measure it. I would recommend 20 to 25 ounces. 27 is where I would get concerned, and anything under 16, it's not going to be enough. So that is 16 ounces right there. Already got some spillage going on. All right, so like I said, I'm going to put in another 8 ounces of water roughly. Be a little bit less just to avoid it. Ends up being a little bit more. I'm going to leave, I don't know, 3 or so ounces out for the moment. And this thing's gonna want you to turn that and lock it into place. And then we got the power button right there. And so you can see we've got 51 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I need to set the unit, and so for that, there's this water droplet down here, which I guess you could not see. And now you can see it is, well, all right, let's see. Maybe I need to plug in this thing over here. So, plugging in the external sensor. Oh, there we go. All right, so now you can hear the unit kicking on, and you can see that there are 2 readings. So we got 48 down here, or here, sorry, and 45 up top. So the 48 is actually the humidity sensor at the bottom of the unit, and then the top level is the one there. So I'm going to see if I can, well, I guess I could just stick it over here, right? And what you should see as this goes on is that this top sensor should start to rise a lot quicker than that bottom sensor is going to do. And this is more or less the operation of it. Now, it's going to be difficult for me to show you here, like it getting fully up to 69% relative humidity, because it's not going to, both sensors are not going to be able to do that. All right, on to the pros and the cons. I'm going to turn this thing off first. It'll kick off in a second. So the good stuff, first things first, it works. And I had a perfect test bed for this. In 2018, we purchased a Humidor Supreme HS2000, which might as well be probably is the best-selling cabinet humidor here in America, and it has been a little leaky ever since we got it. So I've had 2 different humidifiers go into that humidor, humidifiers that worked well in other humidors, like the actual humidifiers that were placed inside of that worked well in other humidors, but they've been unable to keep the 68, 69% humidity level I set in that thing. And I was like, great, if this thing's going to truly work, let's see it work in this somewhat leaky humidor. It took about 2 to 3 months. The first 2 months I was having to refill the humidifier once a week, sometimes even more than once a week. And it would get to the level I set it at, but then it would run out of water or would tell me it needs to be refilled. And after about month 3, it's been steady sailing, consistently at 68%, which is a humidity level it never would get to with those other humidifiers. I'm only having to refill it in the summer months every other week at most. In the winter, sometimes as much as like 3 times a month when it gets drier here in Dallas. But it's worked very, very well, and I think that's probably because of the ultrasonic aspects and the better humidity distribution inside. I don't actually think that's the best feature this thing's got. I think it's this, or at least partially this. So having the dual humidity sensors, this is the external one, and then again, there's one built into the bottom of the humidifier itself. Having them and being able to place them in different parts of the humidor, and then having the logic, which tries to equalize out sort of the humidity level. So if you set it to 68, and the bottom's at 65 and the top's at 70, it'll try to like help it get both to 68. I don't entirely know like the secret sauce there and the science behind it, and Sonic certainly isn't going to disclose that. But the dual humidity sensor aspect is surprisingly uncommon. I could not find another cabinet humidifier that's sold here in America that has this as a feature. If you know of one, please let me know in the comment section below. But certainly not common amongst the competitors, and then the logic seems to work out pretty well. The third feature is one that I did not use, but could be very useful, and that is these plumbing options here on the side. If you have the ability to do this, it seems like an awesome feature, especially knowing that there is the sort of overflow protection built in. It would mean that you would hook this thing up, and the only thing you need to do is clean it, again, once every 6 months, and otherwise don't have to worry about refilling it. So on to the cons, and there is at least one really, really sort of mind-blowingly annoying feature, but the good news is that if you plumb this thing in, you don't have to worry about it. But if you're like me and you're going to use the humidifier as a standalone, not plumbed in unit, then get ready to be annoyed by the water capacity. So I'm going to turn the unit on, and it's got an advertised water capacity of 0.8 liters, which is 27-ish ounces of water. I'm going to add more water, guessing that we're getting about 35 ounces of water when all said and done. Maybe a little bit more than that. And you see there's an error message, right? Now, right now, humidity is still coming out of the top. But in a second, it will turn off, and there's the error message up front, and obviously the very attractive beeping noise. I'm going to unplug the unit so you don't have to hear that. But as you saw, once it had too much water in, even though the humidity wasn't the right level, it cut off. Understandable, that is what happens when the unit thinks it has too much water in. The crazy part is that when you see how much water is inside of this thing, you're gonna go, wait a minute, it doesn't even look half full. And from a like hardware, how much water can it hold perspective, it's not close to half full. And so that's a little bit weird, right? And for the record, I don't have enough water in this thing right now to where the overflow valve is going to become a factor. It's not close to that at all. So despite that, this is an incredibly easy product to recommend. And I'm glad that the first, at least as far as I know, ultrasonic humidifier for cabinet humidors that showed up was not just an existing model and then it had the ultrasonic transducer and somebody decided to charge $150 more because they could, because there was no other ultrasonic humidifier for cabinet humidors on the market. Instead, Sonic, a company that had not made a cabinet humidifier before, came out with this thing that's got other features beyond just the ultrasonic. And it's got more features than I've even talked about. You can read more about it. In fact, I have more to say on halfwheel.com. But it does not have one feature yet, sort of. Well, not the yet part of it. It currently does not have functioning Wi-Fi capability. And I say currently because it does have Wi-Fi. You actually can see a Wi-Fi logo over here. And the hardware, what I'm told, is in this thing. It's a software issue. Sonic tells me they are continuing to work on the software and that the plan is that whenever the software is done, it will work with existing already purchased cabinet humidifiers that it has made. I don't know anything beyond it. I don't know if it's going to be a paid feature, a subscription, an app, or anything like that. What I can say is that Wi-Fi is not a common feature, but Cigar Oasis, which might as well be the brand name of electronic humidifiers, does offer it and has offered it for many years. Cigar Oasis has an app and you can monitor the humidity levels, you can see historical humidity levels, and you can even change the humidity levels. And I would expect that Sonic's implementation is going to be something similar to that, where you can not only see the humidity, but you can also change it. And if it has that feature, then I think it's sort of game over. Like, I don't know what else you would really want from it other than some more usable water capacity, but one can dream. If you'd like to read more about this, check out halfwheel.com. You can also read reviews of other accessories, including humidors and lighters, cutters, ashtrays, as well as reviews of cigars themselves and daily coverage of the premium cigar industry.